Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the vast windswept grasslands of the 13th century, where the sky stretches farther than your eyes can follow, and the campfires of Khans glow like little stars scattered across the steppes. You're not wandering, you're invited. You've been given a rare honor, a seat at the edge of a royal Mongol feast. And trust me, you probably won't survive this unless you've already developed a deep affection for sheep fat and fermented milk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive not in a palace, but in a rolling city of golden yurts, those big round tents that breathe with the wind and glow from within. The sun is just beginning to sink into the horizon, painting everything in soft apricot light. The grass is high, dry, and fragrant. You step carefully, the hem of your borrowed robe brushing against your ankles as you follow a servant carrying a basin of goat's milk toward the center of the encampment. This is the heart of it all. The Khan's mobile court. No thrones, no marble, no fountains, just leather, wool, fire, and steel. And food. Oh, so much food. Everywhere you look, there's motion. A cook carefully flips a rack of ribs over a slow fire. A young boy grinds dried cheese with a stone pestle. A woman with arms like tree trunks stirs a massive cauldron with a paddle taller than she is. It smells intense, heavy with meat smoke and sour milk, but also a hint of wild thyme and something nutty, drifting from a pan of toasted millet. The feast isn't formal. There's no schedule, no trumpets, just the slow swell of people gathering, folding themselves into the grass in concentric rings. The closer you sit to the Khan's tent, the more important you are. You've been placed somewhere in the second ring. Not bad for someone who can't tell horse meat from goat at first sniff. You're not served by name. You're served by proximity and curiosity. A man with a shaved crown and a silver ladle offers you a chunk of mutton so tender it falls apart in his hand. No plate, just a sliver of flatbread to hold it. You're handed a skin of fermented mare's milk and told sip slowly or be humbled. Noted. Mainstream historians agree that Mongol feasts were power displays, but not through gold or excess, through abundance of the essential: meat, dairy, air, and movement. They feasted to show they could feed armies, move camp in an afternoon, and still toast the spirits by moonlight. And there's music, not loud, but steady. A two-string moran kur, the horsehead fiddle, playing something slow and repetitive, hypnotic. You lean back and feel the grass press into your shoulders. The wind brushes your cheeks, and for a moment you forget that you haven't used a fork in hours. Here's the quirky part. Even though you're in the royal court, you don't see bowls or cutlery. Food is passed on ladles, on blades, on sheets of bark, and occasionally on hands. A server simply rips a slab of ribs apart, lays it on a birch plank, and places it in front of you like an offering. It's barbaric. It's beautiful. Historians still argue whether the lack of cutlery was due to practicality or ritual. Some say it kept things efficient on campaign. Others claim touching the food honored its spirit. Either way, you're learning fast. No one here is dainty. If your fingers don't shine by the end of the meal, you haven't really eaten. The sun sets completely, now the sky a wide navy curtain. Torches are lit. Their smoke spirals into the darkness. The mood shifts. There's a subtle quiet, a reverence, as the Khan's attendants emerge from his yurt with the first ceremonial dish, a roasted sheep's head, perfectly intact. No one gasps. This is expected. The head is not eaten for show. It's shared carefully, methodically. Each part offered to a specific person based on rank. The tongue goes to the general, the eyes to the advisors, the brain, if you're wondering often, to the guest of highest honor. Lucky you, not tonight. A warm bowl is passed to you, next thin soup made from bone broth and wild onions. It smells earthy and clean. You sip it slowly, the flavors deeper than they look. This isn't just hydration. It's preparation, you're told. It teaches the stomach to stay brave. Quirky again. Some Mongol chefs believed broths could read your mood. If it felt bitter, perhaps your heart was heavy. If it tasted weak, maybe you were out of alignment with the moon. There's no science behind it. But as you sip your soup under the stars, you kind of get it. You glance at the Khan's tent, still quiet. He hasn't emerged yet. That's normal. He eats last after observing who eats how and why. The feast you're realizing isn't just about nourishment. It's about watching, about listening to appetite. And as the fire crackles and the stew bubbles, and the air smells of roasted garlic and sheep's milk butter, you let yourself lean back just a little more. Your belly is warm, your hands are sticky, and for the first time, your soul feels full. The firelight flickers low now, casting orange halos on the bronze pots and polished ladles scattered across the grass. You're reclining slightly, your back against a rolled felt saddlebag belly, comfortably full from the first wave of the feast. But around you the camp doesn't quiet. Not yet. It changes rhythm. This is when the real cooking begins. The early courses, meats, broths, and breads, were only the curtain rising. Now the royal chefs get serious. You wander behind the feasting rings past a row of tethered horses to the long shadowed tents where the kitchen fires never go out. Here, the air is thicker, denser. You step into a pocket of warmth and scent so rich it almost knocks you back. Inside, smoke curls up toward the open tent flaps, and in it the smells of garlic frying in lamb fat, fresh onions sizzling on heated stones, and something sweet apricot, maybe gently bubbling in a shallow pan. Several cooks are moving in deliberate silence, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands covered in a slick sheen of oil and flour. The head chef, a square-faced man with a braid that swings like a rope, waves you over. He doesn't greet you. He hands you a bowl. Inside is cork hog, a dish that doesn't just sound like a throat-clearing, it kind of is. Boiled mutton, layered over hot stones, sealed inside a metal vessel and pressurized with steam. You take a bite. The meat falls away with a lazy sigh. It's peppery, fatty, slightly charred, and soft enough to eat in the dark, without wondering which part of the sheep it came from. You thank him. He grunts and returns to his cauldron. Cork hog wasn't made just for taste, it was made for function. Warriors needed fuel, warmth, endurance. This dish delivered all three. Mainstream historians agree that Mongol cuisine prioritized performance over palate, but somehow it still ended up delicious. In one corner, a younger cook grinds dried meat into powder. You watch as he adds animal fat and crushed wild garlic, shaping the mixture into coin-sized patties. Campaign cakes, someone whispers, meat you can pack in a saddlebag for a month. You suddenly realize the Mongol feast wasn't just about this moment. It was about all the moments to come. Every meal was forward-facing. Food meant to travel, to endure, to outlast even the people who prepared it. The wind shifts slightly, and the smoke from a nearby iron pan finds your eyes. You blink through it to see a tray of round dumplings being lowered onto a bed of hot stones. These are booze-steamed pockets of ground meat and onion, sealed with a twist at the top, like tiny clay jars. One of the cooks explains that if a dumpling bursts during cooking, it's bad luck. The flavor escapes, he says solemnly, and so does the good fortune. You learn quickly that Mongol chefs were more than cooks. They were interpreters. They read the texture of meat the way others read palms. They measured heat with the back of the hand. They didn't follow recipes. They followed instinct. And here's the quirky detail that makes you pause. No two chefs used the same salt. That's right, each chef had a personal salt pouch, some filled with crushed rock salt from sacred lakes. Others blended theirs with dried goat milk or powdered mushroom. Salt wasn't seasoning, it was signature, an edible fingerprint. Historians still argue whether these personal blends were superstition or subtle science. But every chef swore theirs could bring out the truth in meat. As you wander farther, you find a wide, shallow pot filled with what looks like shredded bark. Nope, it's Bort's sliced, sun-dried meat stored for months, sometimes years. Rehydrated in broth, it becomes a smoky, chewy stew that tastes like it survived something, which honestly it has. You take a bowl, thank the cook, and sit on a low stool near the fire. You chew, slowly. The taste is rich but restrained. You can almost feel the effort it took to create this days of drying, slicing, stirring, preserving. A feast not grown in a single day, but harvested from months of preparation. Someone hands you a flask. Not mare's milk this time. Something sharper. Fermented barley brewed in a cracked earthen jar. You take a sip. It's rough, but it works. The mood here is quiet, focused. There's no shouting, no banging pots. Every move is purposeful. You realize this kitchen isn't just a place of food. It's a place of strategy. Each dish has a role: replenish salt, soothe the stomach, warm the joints, clear the head, reignite hunger. You watch as a small boy carries a bowl of white curds toward the feast ring. His hands are careful, reverent. These are arul dried cheese pieces, crunchy and tart, said to clean the teeth and settle the nerves. The Khan is said to chew them before battle or before negotiation. And now so do you. The firelight dances on the tent walls. The scent of roasted fat clings to your hair. The warmth settles deep in your bones. You close your eyes, bowl in hand, and drift just for a moment. The feast still hums behind you, but your mind is still and fed. Your body full, your belly warm. And for tonight, that's enough. You wake with a soft jolt, not from noise, but from laughter. Warm, easy laughter, carried on morning wind light as horsehair. You're still in the camp, lying on your side in the grass near a low burning fire. Your bowl from last night is empty, tipped in the dew. Around you, the cooks are already moving again, chopping onions with curved knives, stirring yogurt with carved bone paddles, and whispering about which guests asked for second helpings. You stretch brush crumbs from your robes and follow the sound of meat sizzling somewhere ahead. This is breakfast, but not the kind you're used to. A woman stands behind a flat iron sheet, balanced on stones, frying thin slices of liver in mutton fat. Beside her, a small pot of barley bubbles, quietly, its surface broken now and then by a dollop of clarified butter. She ladles it into wooden bowls, one by one, and tops each with shavings of dried cheese, sharp, salty aged, until it crumbles like chalk. She hands you one with a nod. No words. You sip. It's warm, plain, a little sour, and unexpectedly calming. The perfect reset after a night of roasted meat. Fermented mare's milk and dumplings with unpredictable steam pressure. Mainstream historians once dismissed Mongol breakfasts as primitive, too much meat, not enough variety. But recent research paints a different picture. These meals weren't basic. They were purposeful, designed to replenish salt balance heat and prepare the body for either war or diplomacy. A boy next to you dips flatbread into a dish of crushed wild onions and salted horse fat. His father, chewing thoughtfully beside him, says, "Eat sharp food in the morning, and your mind won't doze until sunset." You suspect he's not wrong. Then you notice something peculiar. One of the servants is preparing something wrapped in sheepskin and tied with red string. He carries it not to a guest, but into the Khan's personal tent. It smells sweet, caramelized, buttery. You raise an eyebrow. Sweet curds, someone tells you, steamed over pine ash. He eats them with apricot. Wait, the Khan gets dessert for breakfast. Turns out, yes. Royal chefs believed in balancing hot and cold energies. If the evening feast was heavy, smoked meat salt, Then the morning needed to reverse the weight. A plate of dried apricots, almond paste, or sweetened yogurt balls would do just that. And it wasn't just the Khan who benefited. Diplomats from far-off lands were often treated to soft breakfast, a spread meant to soothe upset stomachs and gently impress visiting dignitaries. Think of it like an edible olive branch. We want peace. Here, have something soft and slightly sour. You're handed a bowl of yogurt next. It's thick sour whipped with honey and cracked coriander seed. You stir it with your finger. It tastes like wildflowers and restraint. Nearby, two elderly men are dipping dried beef into hot tea. Yes, you heard that right. Beef into tea. They slurp it slowly, nodding in rhythm. The tea itself is pale, salty, and steeped with butter. No sugar, no milk, just salt, warmth, and something that smells faintly of boiled grass. Quirky fact: Mongol milk tea, sute tsai, wasn't a comfort drink. It was a calculation. Each ingredient added to balance the body's elements. The salt prevented dehydration. The butter added calories. The milk soothed the stomach. Some versions even included toasted millet or strips of dried turnip. It was closer to broth than tea. Historians still argue whether the Mongols truly enjoyed the taste or just respected the effect. But either way, they drank gallons of the stuff. You're not sure how much you enjoy it, but by the third sip, you start to feel oddly alert. As breakfast winds down, a small group begins setting up trays of food, not for the living, but for the spirits. A loaf of barley bread, a wedge of hard cheese, a small bowl of arag placed gently near the ancestral shrine beside the Khan's yurt. You ask what it's for. Feeding the past, a woman says, so the future won't go hungry. She tells you Mongols believe that honoring ancestors with food helped ensure success in the present, and not just with words, with actual meals. Food meant memory, and memory demanded offerings. You begin to notice how deeply ritual is woven into every layer of this feast, not showy rituals, but practical poetry. A piece of bread split 3 ways for 3 generations. A spoonful of broth tossed into the fire before a pot is stirred. The first sip of tea always given to the sky. None of it is loud, none of it explained, but all of it matters. By the time the sun fully rises, most of the camp is in motion again. Horses being saddled, banners tied, plans whispered over tea. The feast isn't over, it's just changing form. Because in Mongol culture, eating wasn't isolated. It didn't sit politely at a table. It moved. It followed. It lingered. A meal was not an interruption. It was the thread between everything else. You finish your last sip of tea. It's salty, but it feels like a full stop. You exhale, fed, focused, ready. You stir again, a little after sunrise when the air is already warm and smells faintly of churned milk-scorched iron and pine-smoked lamb fat. Morning routines in the royal camp begin before the birds can even shake dew from their feathers. The quiet bustle is comforting now, a lullaby in reverse. You know the rhythm. You can anticipate the sounds, the scrape of ladles, the slap of dough, the occasional high-pitched whistle of water boiling over in a metal cauldron. This morning, you've earned a little privilege. A cook waves you over with 2 fingers and hands you something unusual, a small scroll of brown dough wrapped around an interior of honeyed crushed nuts. It's still warm. The Mongol version of a breakfast pastry? Not quite. This is zula, a rare delicacy saved for honored guests and picky children. You chew carefully. The nuts, almonds, maybe walnuts, crackle gently between your teeth, held together by some sort of sticky spiced syrup. You're not sure if it's cinnamon or powdered root, maybe both. It's delicious and sticky, very sticky. The cook laughs at your expression and hands you a strip of dried felt to wipe your fingers. You wonder for a moment whether they've invented the world's first napkin. Nearby, a group of elder women huddle over a round stone slab. They're not cooking, they're grinding. Not grain this time, but dried berries and pressed herbs combined with crushed bone meal and milk curds. They add water, drop by drop, shaping the mixture into small pellets. What are those? You ask. A girl with dark braids answers, travel rations. Warrior snacks. Indeed, Mongol warriors didn't rely only on meat and milk. They carried dense, high-calorie pellets called tsagan-ide white food. Some were sweetened, others fortified with marrow or dried fish paste. They were meant to last for weeks without spoiling. Some modern historians even compare them to medieval protein bars. It's not entirely wrong, though you suspect chocolate was not involved. As she speaks, she tosses you one. You catch it reflexively. It's rock hard. You try to bite it. Nope. She grins. Soften it in tea. You drop the pellet into a small bowl of suete tsai, that curious buttered milk tea again. It bubbles faintly. Slowly, the pellet softens the oils, rising to the top in tiny rainbows. It still tastes like something from a survivalist's bunker, but your stomach is grateful. Now, today's main meal is being prepped, and you're invited to observe the sacred process from start to finish. This won't be a quick-fire session of mutton kebabs or hand-pulled noodles. No. This is the centerpiece, the slow-cooked heart of the feast to come. Step 1. The beast. A sheep is selected, not the largest, but the best shaped. Clean coat, clear eyes, steady breath. It's not random. This sheep will be remembered. Its bones will be buried with herbs. A sliver of its fat will be burned as offering. Even the direction it faces before the slaughter matters. Always east, an old man mutters, toward the sun. Historians still argue whether this practice was religious or practical. Was it rooted in Tengri worship, or simply a way to drain blood efficiently in the sun's warmth? Either way, the ritual unfolds with quiet respect. No cheers, no shouting, just intent. The animal is dispatched quickly, cleanly. The carcass is opened, not hacked. And then begins the part you didn't expect, the bone reading. Before the cooking starts, a priestly figure, barefoot eyes rimmed with kohl, examines the liver and shoulder bones. He lays them on a cloth, splashes water on them, and tilts them toward the firelight. Every crack, every line is interpreted. A successful feast, a favorable omen. A mild winter, he declares. You nod slowly. Wait, how can a sheep's shoulder predict weather? You're told this is called scapulimancy, a practice older than Mongol conquests, possibly inherited from the Scythians or Turkic shamans. Quirky, yes. But for a nomadic people whose survival depended on seasonal change, any hint of foresight was sacred. Once the omens are read, the carcass is cleaned, and the real artistry begins. You expect a spit. You expect smoke. Instead, they bring out stones. Smooth, round, river-washed stones, heated over fire until they shimmer. Then one cook begins layering cuts of meat liver, heart ribs into a metal container with herbs, water salt, and those stones. The lid is sealed. The pot is shaken, then shaken again. This is budog, a unique Mongol technique, meat cooked with hot stones inside a sealed skin or metal shell. The stones do the cooking, releasing steam and heat from within. The meat bastes in its own juices. You hear it hiss and sigh like a sleeping animal. The smell is phenomenal. Earthy, gamey, peppery, maybe a hint of sage. This is no barbaric roast. This is science, steam science, pressure-cooked perfection without a single wire or dial. You watch the pot puff up like a drum, and you hear a cook whisper, "The meat will tell us when it's done." No timers, no thermometers, just sound, smell, intuition, culinary jazz. And then you hear the quiet click of fingernails on bone. A cook is checking tenderness the traditional way. He pries loose a rib and pulls gently. It slides out clean, leaving nothing behind. Dinner is close. But before it's served, it must be blessed. A single drop of broth is flung toward the east, another to the fire. The last, to the guest of honor, who tonight is you. The cook taps your chest with a carved spoon. "Remember this," he says. And you do. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake again to the smell of dough puffing up on iron pans, sizzling in lamb grease. The sun has climbed higher. The wind has shifted. And the main course? Yes, the main course is almost ready. They call you over, not to eat, but to help serve. This is your graduation, it seems, from observer to participant. Your hands are wiped with fermented mare's milk. Don't ask, it's a thing. And you're handed a lacquered wooden tray. On it rests a stack of what look like crispy pouches. Not bread, not dumplings. Something in between. "Kushur," says a boy with bright teeth. "Meat pockets. They're blistered golden and give off a hypnotic scent, onions, garlic, and pepper, sealed inside crispy shells of wheat dough. Each one fits in your palm. You pick one up. The bottom is slightly sticky. You almost drop it. The boy laughs. That means it's good. You bite in. The filling is juicy, too hot, deeply savory, like a miniature explosion of mutton and spice. The crust crackles between your teeth. You chew with one side of your mouth because the other side is a little burned. Worth it. Now you understand why kosher stalls line every Mongolian festival today, centuries later. The warriors from earlier now form two long rows. You assume this is some form of military lineup, but it's a dining formation. Rank matters here, even when you're eating off your lap. The Khan himself appears not on horseback, but on foot. He takes his seat at the center, a low platform draped with blue silk. You're amazed at how minimal the display is. No gold chalices, no heaping piles of fruit. Just order, symmetry, warm bowls. This apparently is a royal feast. But the food is anything but minimal. A heavy pot is placed beside him, lid lifted to release a burst of meat-scented steam. Inside is cork hog, another hot stone masterpiece. Chunks of lamb root vegetables, whole garlic cloves, and glistening fat. Blackened stones still rest at the bottom, slick with meat juice. Each person receives a scoop, but before eating, they are expected to pass a stone around palm to palm. It's a bit like a hot potato, with spiritual overtones. Good for joints, one woman tells you, rubbing her knuckles after handling the stone, and for bad dreams. You nod politely, trying not to flinch as it burns your fingers slightly. A fringe fact, sure, but to them, it's basic wellness. You settle down to eat beside a group of younger riders. One of them tears a clove of cooked garlic in half and smears it across a flatbread. Another takes his meat and wraps it in a leafy green you didn't know grew around here. This is Tarasun leaf, he says, grows near horse dung, smells worse than it tastes. You try it. It tastes slightly like arugula's angry cousin. Between bites, you ask about the spices. Where do they come from? The boy shrugs. From the south. Traders bring them. Sometimes we take them. That's one way to describe the Silk Road. Historians still argue whether the Mongol conquests spread spices or simply hoarded them. There's evidence of pepper saffron, even ginger being brought northward and incorporated into feast dishes, though always sparingly. Flavor was important, but overpowering the meat was seen as disrespectful. You glance around now and see something you didn't notice before. Every plate is different, not just in content, but arrangement. Some guests receive bone-in cuts, others liver, others offal, in gelatin. It isn't random. You're told this is called Zolgalt, the etiquette of portioning based on age status and temperament. An elder might be given a heart slice to show trust. A young warrior, ribs for strength. You've been given tongue. It means you talk too much. The cook says, deadpan. Fair. You chew the tongue with slow reverence, imagining how many other feasts it had once described. As the meal continues, music begins. Nothing grand, just a two-stringed morancour played by a girl sitting near the cooking pit. The tune is haunting, looping full of silences. No one speaks for a while. Just the sound of chewing. This, you realize, is not gluttony. It's ritual. Eating, not just to survive, but to remember where the food came from, to honor its heat, its animal, and maybe, just maybe, to get sleepy after. You recline slightly, feeling the weight of the meal settle into your limbs like warm sand. Then a soft thunk by your side. A new bowl, fermented mare's milk. Of course, the meal is not truly complete without this. Hairag, the strange, sour, fizzy drink of fermented horse milk that defies explanation. You take a cautious sip. It's cold. It tastes like carbonated yogurt with emotional baggage. You do not love it, but you finish the bowl anyway because people are watching, and because sometimes tradition isn't about taste, it's about participation. Your eyes begin to droop now, stomachs full, bones warm, and someone passes you a second piece of kushur. You're not even hungry, but you eat it anyway. Because in this moment, eating feels like part of breathing. By the time your eyes flutter open again, the sky has dimmed. Not quite sunset, but the colors are shifting. Hints of rose and copper streak the clouds. You sit up slowly, the taste of roasted lamb still lingering faintly on your tongue, mingled with the aftershock of fermented mare's milk. It's oddly comforting now, like your taste buds have signed a peace treaty with your stomach. Someone tugs your sleeve. It's the braided girl from before. She points to a circle forming in the clearing, a new gathering. Not for eating this time, but for storytelling. And perhaps, oddly enough, for more food. You shuffle over and settle onto a low cushion. In the center of the circle, several cooks are setting out bowls of strange, jiggling substances. Translucent, wobbly, slightly suspicious. You're told these are tsatsar, gelatinous desserts made from boiled animal tendons and sweetened with wild honey and dried berries. Dessert made from boiled bones. You lift a spoonful hesitantly. It trembles like it knows it doesn't belong. But when you take a bite, well, it's surprisingly pleasant. The texture is chewy, like overcooked gummy bears, but the sweetness is clean and mellow with a slightly tart edge from the berries. A man with laugh lines sits beside you and begins to hum a tune that matches the rhythm of his chewing. Across from him, a woman balances a tray of steaming dumplings, smaller than kushur, pinched at the top like tiny fabric pouches. Booze, she says, easier on the teeth. And she's right. The dough is thinner, the meat inside finely minced. It melts on your tongue, peppered, just enough to keep you from dozing off entirely. These dumplings, you're told, were not just a culinary staple, but a political tool. During wartime, booze were prepared and sent with messages folded into the dough. One unlucky bite could reveal a battle strategy or a betrayal. Historians still argue whether such edible espionage was widespread or merely legend passed down in Mongol songs. But it wouldn't surprise you if Genghis himself once bit into a dumpling and declared war mid-chew. You sip more milk tea. This time it's tinged with herbs, something minty, something floral. The aftertaste is sharper, almost peppery. Helps digestion, the braided girl explains, and quiets the mind. You begin to notice something else. Now food in the Mongol camp doesn't arrive in courses. It spirals. Dishes repeat, appear, disappear, then return in slightly new forms. Leftover lamb from lunch. Now it's chopped cold and pressed into jelly. Milk tea that sat too long. Now churned into curds and dried for travel. Even old bread gets reborn as bortsog fried dough knots soaked in honey. It's a cycle. Nothing wasted. Even the scraps have a story. You glance behind the cooking tent where a pair of dogs gnaw peacefully on shin bones beside two children gnawing on the same bones. The dogs look jealous. You look away. Now a platter of roasted marmot is brought out. Yes, marmot. It's a whole roasted rodent, spiced and stuffed with hot stones, like a mini bulldog. You're not sure if it's a prank. The skin is crispy, the smell nutty and slightly wild. The cook shrugs. High in fat. Good for cold nights. You take a bite because of course you do. And you learn something valuable. If you can survive fermented milk and bone jelly, marmot is just another Tuesday. A gust of wind kicks dust through the circle. The musicians begin to play again, slower this time. Someone tosses dried herbs into a small brazier, and a column of fragrant smoke twists upward, carrying the scent of pine cedar and dried goat dung. It smells oddly calming. You begin to understand now that Mongol cuisine wasn't just built on what was available. It was a philosophy of mobility, of maximizing the minimum, of extracting flavor from the harshest places. And every meal, every bite, is imbued with ritual. A piece of liver must be sliced east to west. Broth must be stirred only clockwise. Tea poured first for the eldest present. A spoon never left in the bowl. All these rules swirl around your mind as your eyelids begin to lower again. You try to count how many dishes you've tasted. 8, 10, maybe more. You've stopped keeping track, but each one lingers, not just on your tongue, but in your memory. You lean back, propping yourself on your elbows, and watch the stars begin to prick through the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond the tents, wolves howl, faintly nature's final seasoning. And then you hear a child whisper something beside you. Tomorrow we eat dried fish eyes with sour yogurt. You blink slowly. Please let that be a joke. It's nearly full dark now, and you're beginning to accept that Mongol feasting doesn't end. It simply shifts phases. The circle has scattered slightly, with some guests curling into cloaks by the fire, while others refill their cups with more salted milk tea. You, brave and possibly bloated, are handed a shallow bowl. The contents are grayish, slightly chunky, and steaming faintly. You peer into it, like it might blink. It's tsagan ed, someone explains gently. White food. A charming name, you think, for what appears to be sour porridge. But no, it's a term for all dairy-based foods, the pride of the steppe. This particular bowl holds something closer to arul, melted into a soup, a warm mash of dried curds, hot water, and a hint of sugar, like oatmeal with abandonment issues. You taste it, and it's better than it looks. Tart, creamy, familiar in an unfamiliar way, and strangely, it clears your head like a shot of cold wind. There's a reason dairy held such sacred status among Mongols. Cows, yaks, goats, sheep, camels, every beast produced milk, and every drop was transformed into curds, cheese, butter, yogurt, kefir, or urim, the clotted cream you watched them scrape from boiled milk earlier. Historians still debate whether this was by necessity or genius. Probably both. The cook returns with a stone pot, this time covered in a layer of dough. You watch her slice it open like a lid, releasing a waft of steam, so rich it smells brown. Inside, bantan, a porridge-like soup made from hand-pulled flour, lumps, and bits of bone broth. This is comfort food, they say. You eat it with a carved wooden spoon, the kind passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, oiled with age and marked by teeth. There's a simplicity here you can't quite describe. Something tender in the way each dish is named like a cousin and served like a secret. You don't feel like a guest anymore. You feel like a returning relative. Then, just as your bowl is empty, someone claps their hands. Not loudly, just twice. But the effect is instant. Cooks begin bustling again, scraping pans, stacking trays, whispering orders. What's happening now? You ask, mid-yawn. The braided girl smiles. The Khan's midnight meal. Midnight. Of course. Royal feasts, you learn, often involved a final small meal in the hush of night, less about hunger and more about digestion, ritual and dreams. A way to honor the body's stillness after celebration. You shuffle toward a smaller tent this time, more enclosed, ringed with low oil lamps. Inside, everything is quiet, and the food reflects that. First comes zul, a thin broth served in shallow cups, made from boiled bones and seasoned with just salt. It's clear as glass and hot as regret. You sip, and your chest warms instantly. It's followed by small discs of dried cheese by a slag, tough and squeaky, meant to be sucked rather than chewed. The flavor is pure goat grassy, bold, slightly unhinged. You pocket one for later, as if you'll need a survival snack for future dreams. A servant brings round a covered tray, next unveiling something bizarre. Boiled sheep's head, split clean down the middle. You stare. It stares back. This isn't horror, they assure you. This is reverence. In Mongol tradition, the head is not grotesque, but honored, the brain offered to scholars, the tongue to storytellers. You apparently get an ear. It's chewy, but the gesture is clear. You've listened tonight. You've witnessed. A fringe belief floats into the conversation now. Some say eating the head of a wise animal transfers its memory to the diner. Others call that superstition. Historians once again argue whether these feasts were symbolic or just deeply practical. You're too sleepy to decide. Someone refills your tea. This time, it's Su-Te Tsai milk tea with a single pine nut dropped inside. You watch it spin lazily at the bottom of your cup, like a tiny compass. Outside, a chorus of soft snores and muted songs blend into the wind. You curl the blanket around your shoulders and close your eyes, and then a final tray arrives, small, flat, wrapped in linen. It holds nothing but dried apples, walnuts, and a single honey cube. A whisper of sweetness to end the night. You take a bite. It is against all odds perfect. And as the Khan himself stands and thanks his guests in a language older than the dust beneath you, you realize that this meal has not been about sustenance. It has been about presence. Being here, being full, being still. You wake to the quiet hum of dawn, not from roosters or alarms, but from the soft clinking of ladles in kettles and the faint creak of leather saddles being prepared nearby. The camp isn't bustling exactly, but it breathes. It stretches. It stirs like an old dog. You sit up slowly, your limbs reluctant, but your belly surprisingly content. You half expected gastric punishment from last night's marathon of meats, curds, broths, and bonus sheep face. But no, the Mongol feast has held firm. A woman in a faded tunic hands you a cup of something that smells like warm hay. Barley tea, she mutters, then moves on. You sip it, and it's earthy, comforting, and oddly familiar. Not because you've had it before, but because it tastes like the beginning of something. The remnants of the feast have already been packed away. Bones have been boiled into glue, grease scraped for fire starters, ashes sifted. What remains is a small fire and a single metal pan set over it. Inside, pale bubbling mush. You squint. What is that? The braided girl yawns beside you and shrugs. Morning millet. It's the most basic dish yet. Boiled grains, a pinch of salt, and a spoonful of dried milk powder. No fanfare, no garnish. Just enough to begin again. And yet, it's beautiful in its simplicity. You learn that this was the standard start for Mongol mornings. Millet porridge. Sometimes with milk, sometimes with water, sometimes with meat broth, if it was cold. Not a meal of celebration, but of continuity. Good for travel, the cook tells you. Stays in the stomach. You spoon some into your mouth. It tastes like blandness, made holy, filling, quiet, forgiving. As you eat, someone pulls up beside you, an elder, with lines like river maps carved into his face. He sets down a bundle wrapped in hide and begins to unwrap it slowly, revealing a stack of paper-thin flatbreads. These are Bortsog fried dough twists left to harden slightly in the cold air. They're dense, golden, and just barely sweet, more like crackers than pastries. Every family makes them different, he says. Some use butter, some use sheep fat, some whisper to the dough. Depends on the wind. You bite into one. It's crunchy, with just the faintest memory of sweetness. You imagine eating these while riding across the Gobi Desert, crumbs catching in your scarf, portable calories, edible rhythm. The elder continues. When my mother made these, she'd sing, said the dough could hear sadness. You nod solemnly, unsure if you're still dreaming. In the corner, 2 children are playing with a leftover sheep shoulder blade, scraping patterns into it with charcoal. Divination, someone whispers. Shoulder blade reading was common, they explain, among Mongol clans. After a feast, the bones were held over fire and cracks interpreted for omens. Where the bone burned, where it split, that was the message. Scholars argue whether this was taken seriously or simply a game for long nights. Either way, the bone still speaks. You're handed one. It's warm light and faintly greasy. You see a crack like a river branching east. What does it mean, you ask? The cook winks. That you'll eat again soon. A light breeze picks up, and with it the smell of something pungent, not unpleasant, just assertive, like old cheese with an agenda. You follow your nose and discover a small canvas hut near the outskirts of the camp. Inside, racks of cheese wheels hang from ropes, drying like lanterns. These are arul dried curds, shaped by hand, hardened by wind. You pluck one reluctantly. It's as hard as regret. But once you let it soften in your mouth, the flavor unfurls, tangy, milky, full of sun. Mongol children are raised on these. They teethe on them. They gnaw them into submission. And you begin to understand why. Because they're not just snacks. They're anchors. Memory stored in calcium. You leave the hut chewing slowly. Back at the fire, breakfast has shifted again. Now it's just tea and silence. A few riders prepare to leave. The camp will move soon. Packs loaded, tents collapsed. This was just one night after all. But to you it feels like a lifetime of meals compressed into a dream. Someone passes you a final offering, just a sliver of something dark, glossy, and sweet. You nibble. It's candied horse milk skin. You stop chewing. Yes, that's a thing. Apparently it's made by boiling down fermented horse milk until it caramelizes, then drying it into thin leather sheets. Sweet, sour, and weirdly addictive. You chew thoughtfully. Historians still don't know how Mongol chefs discovered this process. Trial and error. Desperation. A bored teenager with a cauldron. Either way, it survived. Just like everything else here. As the sun climbs higher, you gather your things. Nothing really, just borrowed warmth and lingering tastes, and prepare to go. But someone presses a small cloth pouch into your hand. Inside are 3 things a dried cheese curl, a pinch of barley, and one pine nut. You close the pouch and smile. You're on the move now, swaying gently atop a slow-moving Mongol pony, with a belly still warm from barley tea. The camp has vanished behind you, as if it folded itself neatly into the landscape. In its place, grassland, endless, soft, repetitive enough to make your thoughts go wobbly. Your pony huffs. You huff back. It's a good rhythm. You ride with a small caravan, half a dozen riders, and a couple of pack animals, pulling carts, stacked with sack skins and mysterious bundles you suspect might contain more cheese. No one speaks much. You've entered what they call the meat silence, a lull between feasts where your body is digesting so hard it mutes the soul. The terrain dips and rises, but it's all grass, sky, grass, sky. Occasionally a vulture overhead, watching like an unpaid intern. And then you smell smoke. Not campfire smoke. This has fat in it. This has purpose. The caravan turns toward a rocky ridge, and nestled just beyond it is a midday rest stop. A few goats wandering, 2 battered kettles over flame, and a young man holding a long metal fork over a pit. Roasting, always roasting. This time it skewers. You dismount with the grace of a half-baked pancake and shuffle toward the scent. The meat on the skewers is dark thin and speckled with cumin and salt. You watch as he turns them with care, letting the fat drip into the fire with a sizzle like applause. Mutton, you ask? He nods. Mutton. Always mutton. Mutton. The word starts to lose meaning after a while, but not flavor. Somehow Mongol chefs keep reinventing the same animal. It's their blank canvas, their tofu, their jack-of-all-lambs. This version is shashlik meat marinated in yogurt and spices, grilled until just charred at the edges. Each bite is smoky, bold, slightly sour, and deeply satisfying. You chew and squint at the others. They eat in silence too, not out of politeness, but because they are honoring what one man calls the 4th stomach. Apparently, Mongols believed in 4 stomachs, not literally, but metaphorically, the first for milk, the second for meat, the third for broth, and the 4th for surprises. You ask, what kind of surprises? He shrugs. Sometimes more meat, sometimes regret. Fair enough. After the skewers come dumplings, banch, and booze. These are steamed or boiled dough pockets filled with, you guessed it, mutton. But the magic is in the juice. One bite and broth explodes in your mouth like a tiny geyser of joy. You burn your tongue. Worth it. One chef grins and explains the trick is sealing it tight. If you lose the juice, it's just sadness in a shell. Historians still argue whether dumplings were borrowed from Chinese culinary influence or developed independently on the steppe. Some claim they were brought along the Silk Road. Others insist a clever herder once dropped meat in flour and decided to steam it out of laziness. Either way, they're glorious. You lean back on a rock, belly taut, eyelids heavy. But there's more. A boy walks past carrying a small leather pouch. He opens it and offers you something white and cube-like. You bite it. Oh, it's dried fermented mare's milk, also known as karzagas, sometimes translated as milkstone. It's shockingly tart, sharp, like yogurt, decided to live dangerously. You cough. The boy laughs. You've passed the test. Apparently this snack is considered both medicine and challenge, high in probiotics, good for the soul, and dental strength. And then the stories begin, as you chew what feels like a fistful of chalky citrus lightning. An old woman near the fire begins to speak. Her voice is low, warm, and slightly scratchy, like it's been aged in a smoked yurt. She tells the tale of the Mongol Khans feast, a legendary gathering where the food changed color with each course, and guests had to guess the ingredients without using their noses. She tells of the cheese duel, where two rival clans battled not with swords, but with increasingly elaborate cheese sculptures, one shaped a goat mid-leap, the other an eagle with 7 wings. No one remembers who won, only that everyone got indigestion. And finally, she tells of the invisible soup, a broth so clear it could only be served in the dark, because in daylight it vanished entirely. Is that true, you ask? She raises an eyebrow. Does it matter? You nod. It does not. Later, someone brings you a final cup. It's light pink, sweet, bubbly. You hesitate. Strawberry, you ask. He snorts. No. Beetroot and fermented camel milk. Ah, of course. The 4th stomach sighs. You sip anyway. And it's strange, but good strange, like your taste buds are wearing new shoes. The fire crackles softly. A goat sneezes nearby. You lean against your saddlebag feet, stretched out, watching the sky turn soft blue. And just before your eyes close, someone drops a final treat in your lap, a ball of fried dough rolled in crushed nuts and honey. No name, no explanation, but you eat it. And it is peace. Your pony clops steadily through low grass hooves, pressing into the earth with a rhythm so hypnotic that you briefly wonder if time has paused just for you. Overhead, the sun lounges lazily behind gauzy clouds, casting soft shadows that sway with each step your mount takes. You're full, dangerously so, but the Mongols are not done feeding you yet, because now it's snack time. You arrive at a midday stop, not quite a settlement, not quite a camp, just a cluster of tents, loosely anchored by fluttering yak hair ropes, and guarded by a sleepy dog that only opens one eye to acknowledge your presence. Inside the main tent, it smells like the inside of a leather boot that has recently been dunked in warm milk and then sprinkled with salt. You breathe in deep. Somehow you are both repulsed and comforted. Sit, someone says, pointing to a pile of felt cushions. You oblige. And that's when they bring out the dried meat. Borts, sun-dried strips of beef or mutton, sliced thin, and hung to cure in the cold wind until it hardens into edible leather. You pick up a piece. It flexes slightly like it might hold a grudge, but with one bite your jaw engages in an unspoken pact of endurance. It's tough, chewy, salty enough to season your dreams, but oddly satisfying, like survival itself has been compressed into a strip. This keeps for months, the host explains, even years if the rats don't find it. You ask how it's made. He shrugs. Wind, time, patience. 3 ingredients modern chefs tend to forget. As you chew and chew and chew, the conversation drifts to storage, how the Mongols preserved food during long rides and sieges. Without refrigeration, their pantry was the open sky. Butter was stored in skin pouches, cured meats were tied to saddles, and yogurt was dried into brittle discs, then ground to powder and rehydrated later. It was less about flavor and more about function food as fuel, not decoration. You're offered another snack, kale mud clotted cream, made by simmering milk until the fat rises, then scraping it off and mixing it with sugar or fried millet. It's the Mongol version of dessert. You take a small bite and it melts like snow on a skillet, sweet, buttery, and slightly smoky. Suddenly you remember your 4th stomach. It weeps. Nearby, a group of riders are arguing gently, lazily about the best way to roast marmot. Yes, marmot. Apparently, budog is a traditional Mongol delicacy in which the marmot is cooked from the inside out, using hot stones stuffed into its abdominal cavity. The fur is singed off. The animal is inflated like a balloon, and the internal stones cook the meat. You blink slowly. Someone hands you a sliver. You chew. It's gamey, earthy, with hints of rosemary, though no one remembers adding rosemary. Historians still debate whether budog originated from necessity or from a rogue culinary genius who thought, what if the oven was inside the animal? A nearby scholar type insists budog is a dying art, replaced by easier methods. Others claim it's still practiced in secret feasts. Either way, you've had it now. You feel strange, powerful, slightly greasy. Later, someone pulls out a goat's stomach filled with a semi-solid yogurt-like mass. You hesitate. Cheese, you ask? Sort of, they reply. Stomach cheese. Ah, of course. This is biaslag, a fresh, soft cheese made by curdling milk with rennet, often using the actual stomach lining of a baby goat. It's creamy, faintly sour, and spread over flatbread like a luxurious insult to lactose intolerance. You take a bite, and another, and another. Then they bring out honey, a thick golden drizzle poured directly onto the cheese. The result is something transcendent, sticky, floral, and grounding. The woman next to you, face like a crumpled map, nods, slowly. This was Genghis Khan's favorite, she claims. You doubt that's historically provable, but you choose to believe. Even the sky seems to agree. It darkens slightly as clouds gather, as if bowing in reverence to the cheese-honey combo. You're offered a drink to wash it down, terrasoon, a distilled liquor made from fermented milk. It smells like a dare, tastes like smoke, heat, and regret. You sip, just a little. You don't want to hallucinate a yak again. One elder pats your back. "It's for health," he says. You nod. "It's for survival." As the day stretches on, the food slows. Bellies fill. The conversation's quiet. You lie back on a woven rug and close your eyes for a moment. The air smells of dust, fat, and distant rain. The dog from earlier curls beside you, snoring softly. And just before sleep pulls you under, you hear someone whisper, "Tomorrow we eat the eye." You pretend not to hear. You wake to the sound of something sizzling. Not in a pan, there are no pans here, but something unmistakably cooking. And you realize with an emotion, somewhere between horror and admiration, that Mongol chefs do not rest. Even breakfast is serious business. You sit up, brushing yak hair off your sleeve, and catch sight of a round iron griddle propped over an open flame. A woman expression, neutral sleeves, rolled and muscles forged from years of kneading slaps a round of dough onto the surface with a sharp thwap. Ah, flatbread, called burtsog, when fried gambir, when griddled, or sometimes just that thing you eat with everything. This bread is the anchor of the nomad's plate. It's dense, chewy, and slightly sweet when done right. And yes, it's done right this morning. You take a piece, still warm, a little smoky, edges crisp from the fire, but the center soft enough to tuck into and disappear without chewing if you're not careful. You're offered a spread of accompaniments, clotted cream, berry jam, and something labeled only as fat. You ask for clarification. "Horse fat," someone replies. Of course it is. Historians still argue whether the Mongols deliberately avoided certain grains or whether scarcity dictated their starch intake. Wheat wasn't always readily available on the steppe, so these breads were often made from barley or millet flour instead. What they lacked in puff, they made up for in resilience. Beside the griddle, a small pot bubbles gently. You approach, peering in. Porridge, but not just any porridge. This is tsagan ide, literally white food. A class of dairy-based dishes that could be anything from yogurt soup to cream-simmered millet, depending on who's cooking. This one has millet sour milk and tiny cubes of cheese bobbing like confused bath toys. You're handed a bowl. It smells like a barn, but comforting, like the world could end, and this porridge would still be here waiting. You eat slowly, chasing each bite with a sip of hot brick tea, black strong and lightly salted. It's called sute tsai, and it's more soup than drink. The salt helps keep you hydrated. The fat helps keep you warm. The flavor. Imagine someone took a cup of Lipton, added a pat of butter, and whispered ocean breeze into it. Weirdly refreshing. One writer claims it cures headaches, altitude sickness, and emotional instability. You don't argue. As you sip, someone retells the tale of a Mongol war camp that ran out of meat. So the cooks turned to milk churning, curdling, and inventing 10 new recipes in a day. Necessity is the mother of milk-based invention, they joke. You laugh, but quietly. Your stomach is concentrating. Next, they pass around Arul rock-hard cheese chunks that double as snacks and dental endurance tests. You pop one in your mouth and immediately regret it. It's like trying to suck flavor out of a pebble. But after 10 minutes, it softens, tangy, bright, a little nutty, still safer than the liquor. A young herder sits beside you, nibbling his cheese and recounting how Genghis Khan supposedly refused to eat fruit because he trusted meat more. Fruit spoils the mind, the boy says solemnly. Historians are divided on that one. There's no hard evidence the great Khan waged war on grapes, but the Mongols certainly weren't big on farming, and fresh produce was scarce. Their strength came from livestock horns, hooves, and what spilled from udders. Meanwhile, a nearby tent flap opens, and someone emerges carrying a round wooden box. Inside is a soft mound of butter molded into the shape of a ram's head. You raise an eyebrow. For special days, the host says, symbol of strength. You watch as they slice it like a cake, handing pieces around on tiny plates made of bone. You eat it plain, just butter. And it is somehow more than butter, earthier, richer, like someone taught the cream to meditate before churning it. As the morning stretches toward noon, another kettle appears, this one filled with goriltai shul, a noodle soup made from hand-cut flour noodles, chunks of mutton, and root vegetables, if someone's lucky enough to have them. The broth is fatty, opaque, and smells like winter survival. A spoonful warms you instantly. Then another. You ask how the noodles are made. With a knife and boredom, someone answers. Apparently, the dough is rolled thin, folded several times, and then cut into ribbons with the precision of a monk doing calligraphy in a windstorm. There's no need for perfection, just consistency. You eat until your spoon sinks in the bowl, unable to find solid ground. And then, just when you think you're finished, dessert arrives. Fermented rice cakes, soaked in honeyed milk, dusted with powdered cheese. It's sweet, sticky, and vaguely offensive, but in a lovable way. Like if cheesecake had a rugged older sibling raised in a yurt. You recline full again, watching the wind tug at the edge of a tent. The dog from earlier wanders by and flops at your feet. His belly rises and falls in rhythm with the flap of canvas above, and you think maybe this is all there is. Meat, milk, wind, and the quiet certainty that someone somewhere is always boiling something just for you. The wind picks up that afternoon, not enough to call it a storm, but enough that your borrowed robe flutters around your ankles like a cranky spirit. Somewhere behind the main tent, someone's whistling a tune in a minor key, and for a moment you wonder if it's a lullaby or a warning. Then the smell hits you, roasting meat again. You shuffle toward the smoke, half expecting the ghost of a sheep to rise from the fire and ask if you've had enough yet. But no, this time the featured dish is cork hog, and it is Mongolian barbecue in its most dramatic form. Picture this, a large metal container stuffed with layers of mutton onions, carrots, and hot stones. Yes, actual river stones, heated until glowing. The meat is layered between the stones, and the pot is sealed tight. Over time, the radiant heat from the stones cooks everything slowly, creating steam and pressure, and a meal that tastes like campfire and ambition. You arrive just as they crack the pot open. A hiss of steam escapes, carrying the perfume of caramelized fat, scorched bone, and just barely rosemary again. You're starting to think rosemary just happens on the steppe like dew or disappointment. A man with soot-stained fingers pulls out a glistening chunk of lamb and plops it into your hands. No utensils, no ceremony, just food and fire and the full weight of meat destiny. You bite. It's tender. The fat melts instantly, coating your teeth like warm butter. The meat has that deep mineral flavor you only get from animals that spent their lives wandering free. You don't say anything. You just nod slowly and keep chewing. Next, they hand you a stone. It's smooth, heavy, and hot enough to burn away your doubts. You juggle it awkwardly between your palms. Good for digestion, they say. Also, good for third-degree burns, you reply. Still you hold it. Because why not? You've held stranger things in this story already. Remember the stomach cheese. You don't want to, but you do. Historians still argue whether cork hog was invented out of culinary creativity or logistical panic. Some suggest it was adapted from Chinese hot pots. Others, that it emerged from battlefield improvisation. We don't have a grill, but we've got rocks. You decide it was genius, either way. Nearby, a different dish simmers in a wide, shallow pan. This one is suivan, a noodle stir-fry, made with pre-cooked flour noodles, bits of mutton, and shredded vegetables. If cork hog is about heat and patience, suivan is about speed and resourcefulness. The noodles are elastic and dense, the meat crisped at the edges, the vegetables soft enough to forget they were once crunchy. You eat with your fingers. Everyone does. It's not rude, it's survival. Across the camp, you spot a few children gathered around a smaller fire, roasting what appear to be bones. Yes, bones. Turns out roasted marrow is a prized snack. They crack the bones open with rocks, scoop out the soft, fatty core, and smear it on bread, or just lick it straight off the stick like medieval bone popsicles. You try one. It's earthy, creamy, and faintly nutty, like butter that once had opinions. They offer seconds. You decline. For now. A grandmother sits nearby, spinning a tale about how bones speak if you listen long enough. She says the marrow tells stories of hunts, of escapes, of winters that nearly swallowed whole families. You lean in. She winks. It's the fat that remembers. A goat bleats somewhere behind you, as if to confirm the theory. For hydration, you're handed arag again, the fermented mare's milk. You've grown to tolerate it, maybe even like it. Each sip is like a gentle dare, fizzy sour, and oddly refreshing. It resets your palate after all the meat, like Mongolian sorbet. A writer mentions that during royal feasts, arag would be passed around in silver cups, and refusing it was a grave insult. You glance at your bowl, wooden chipped and perfectly honorable. The sun begins to lower, and the feast slows. People recline. Laughter drifts like smoke. Someone starts to sing a low, throaty tune that scrapes along your spine like a horsehair bow on cracked leather. The lyrics mention sheep loyalty and what happens if you forget to salt the meat properly. You don't ask questions. You just listen. Because by now, you understand these meals aren't just about feeding the body. They're stories told through fire and fat. History served in broth and bone. And you're the guest who showed up hungry and stayed curious. That earns you another slice of lamb, which, let's be honest, you were going to eat anyway. The stars are out now, sharp and glittering, like someone threw diamonds across a charcoal cloth. You lie back against a rolled saddle, bellyful hands sticky from lamb fat and marrow, and wonder what dessert could possibly look like in a world that already feels like too much. And then you hear the unmistakable bubbling of boiling fat again. Of course, it's time for bortsog, not to be confused with the flatbread from earlier. This bortsog is dessert territory, deep-fried dough twisted into knots, golden brown and glistening with butter and honey. Think of them as nomadic donuts if your donut was trying to survive winter on a mountain ledge. The cook, an older man with a long mustache and the calm hands of someone who has burnt himself thousands of times, plucks one from the oil, drains it for barely a second, then drops it into a wooden bowl already sticky with honey and sour cream. You accept one. It's still hot. The outside crunches between your teeth, and the inside is airy soft, just a touch chewy. The honey makes it almost too sweet, almost, but the tang of the sour cream pulls it back from the edge. You eat 3, maybe 4. Who's counting? Nearby, someone sprinkles them with powdered cheese. You raise an eyebrow. It's tradition, they say. Of course it is, you reply. Some historians believe bortsog may have influenced Central Asian and Russian pastries later on, while others argue the Mongols simply adapted a common Turkic dough recipe to suit their portable lifestyle. Either way, the outcome is delicious and dangerously habit-forming. And then the real show begins. The host of the evening, a man wearing a fur-trimmed deal that's seen both peace and war, raises a silver goblet. It's filled with arki, a homemade distilled spirit made from fermented milk. You've heard the warnings. You've smelled it. You know it's probably a bad idea. He offers you a sip anyway. You hesitate. Medicinal, someone whispers. For digestion. You take a cautious mouthful. It hits like a slap from a flaming goat. There's fire, then numbness, then something vaguely sweet beneath the burn, like a memory of fruit that died nobly. You cough. Everyone laughs gently, but not unkindly. That means it's good, your neighbor says, patting your back. A young woman beside you plays a 2-stringed morang cour, the horsehead fiddle. Its notes are long and haunting, echoing across the steppe like lost questions. The melody loops and bends in ways that make your chest ache. You don't understand the lyrics. You don't need to. The food, the drink, the music, all of it blends into one slow wave of belonging. As the fire dies lower, someone begins telling a story of a royal feast held by Mongol Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. It was said that the feast lasted 7 days and included over 300 dishes, from sheep roasted whole to birds stuffed with garlic, and cakes flavored with crushed pine nuts and wild herbs. One guest reportedly fell asleep face down in his stew and woke up famous. Whether that's true or not, you're tempted to test the theory. The stars pulse above like they're in on the joke. You reach for another bortsog, mostly for the warmth, but also for the sugar coma. Someone's added a drizzle of wild berry jam now, and you decide this is how royalty must feel after battle, sore-fed and vaguely victorious. Historians still argue whether Mongol royalty maintained strict etiquette during meals or encouraged a more egalitarian, seated-on-the-ground camaraderie. You suspect it depended on the mood the guests and whether or not a thunderstorm was on the horizon. Tonight, though, feels sacred. No plates, no napkins, just sticky fingers and laughter swallowed into the sky. A child offers you a carved wooden spoon as a gift. It's small, worn smooth from use, and clearly someone's prized utensil. You hesitate. Accept it, the grandmother says. You're part of the story now. You bow slightly and tuck it into your robe. You don't plan to use it. You'll carry it. The night deepens. The fire becomes embers, and someone begins boiling tea again, because there is always tea, and there is always someone boiling it. You close your eyes, the taste of honey lingering on your lips, and feel the cold creeping in under your robe. A dog curls against your feet. Someone hums the melody from earlier. You wonder how many generations have sat under these stars, eating these foods, telling these stories. And then, just before sleep takes you, someone says, "Tomorrow we butcher the yak." Of course you do. Dawn cracks open the sky like an overripe melon, pale gold at the edges, soft purple at the seams. You blink against the light, breath steaming from your nose, a thin layer of frost forming on your blanket. The fire's long gone cold. The dog is gone too. Only the spoon remains nestled in your sash like a sleepy secret. Your stomach groans, not from hunger this time, but from anticipation, because you remember what they said last night today. It's yak, specifically yak dumplings, yak butter, and something ominously referred to as yak tea. You shuffle toward the main tent with the kind of reverence usually reserved for weddings or funerals. The cook greets you with a nod that suggests both respect and mischief. He hands you a wooden bowl. Inside, booze, steamed dumplings, stuffed with minced yak meat, onion, and garlic. The dough is soft and elastic, folded like a tiny pouch of treasure. The aroma is rich and herbal, with a trace of black pepper and maybe thyme. You bite in. It's juicy, dangerously so. The broth explodes across your tongue, hot and savory, forcing you to hold the dumpling over your bowl like it's a leaky water balloon. You glance at the cook. He smirks. First time you nod. Good. Means it's fresh. The boos are followed by couture flat-fried dumplings with crispy edges and chewy centers. Think of them as the tougher, slightly rebellious cousins of the boos. They're filled with the same yak mixture, but fried in enough oil to make cardiologists nervous. You eat 2, then 3. Your fingers glisten with grease and pride. Someone sets down a cup beside you. It steams. You recognize the smell. Before you see the pale color, it's sute tsai, the infamous yak butter tea, made from brick tea, boiled in water, churned with yak butter, and a pinch of salt. It's not for the faint-hearted. It tastes like salted broth and melted candle with a whisper of grass. At first sip, you nearly gag. Then something clicks. The salt cuts through the grease in your mouth. The fat soothes your dry throat. The warmth seeps into your bones. You take another sip. You don't smile, but your eyebrows soften. Historians still argue whether sute tsai was originally intended as food drink or medicine. It sustained nomads across the steppe for centuries, offering calories, hydration, and sheer stubbornness in a cup. Some suggest the tea was ritualized during religious ceremonies. Others say it was just the most logical use of leftover butter and boredom. Regardless, it works. And it keeps coming. By midday, the feast has morphed into a slow, continuous rhythm. People eat, nap, eat again, sing, sip tea, and repeat. You join in the collective stupor. A man beside you begins preparing our rule, the hardened sun-dried cheese that looks like chalk and chews like regret, made from curdled milk pressed into shapes and left to harden. It's both food and chew toy. You try a piece. It crunches like a broken promise. The flavor is sharp sour and inexplicably sweet at the end, like biting into history. I like it, you say. You will? He replies, as if it's a curse. Children are playing a game nearby, flicking small carved bones across a cloth. You realize their ankle bones cleaned and polished. The game's called shagai, and it's as much fortune-telling as it is sport. They let you try. You flick a bone. It lands with the hollow clack of fate. A child gasps. That's lucky. You don't know what it means, but you bow anyway. The food comes in waves, slices of dried yak, jerky borts, dumplings, boiled in bone broth, slabs of blood sausage wrapped in intestines. You skip this one. No judgment, and bowls of tsagan id, a collective term for all things dairy. There's cream, curd, butter, yogurt, and something between all four that defies translation. A debate breaks out between two elders about whether the yogurt should be salted. One says it preserves the soul. The other says it ruins the cows. You sip your butter tea and stay out of it, because you're just here for the ride. Someone asks you if you've ever tried fermented yak liver. You fake a cough and look at the sun. It's lower than you hoped. As evening approaches, a long table is set, or rather, a long cloth on the ground. On it, everything that hasn't yet been consumed, plus bowls of pickled root vegetables and something red and unidentifiable. Beet, you ask. Maybe they shrug. At this point, it doesn't matter. You eat. Slowly, happily, endlessly. The feast is both a celebration and a test of endurance, humility, and digestive bravery. You're no longer an outsider. You're a guest who has seen the yak, smelled the broth, held the marrow, and drunk the tea without flinching. Well, almost. A child falls asleep in your lap. You don't move. Because this, you realize, is the most sacred moment of all food, shared without expectation, rest granted without question. And tomorrow, well, someone mentioned camel, milk, ice cream. You pretend not to hear it. The sky darkens again, the sun slipping behind the spine of distant hills as if retreating from its responsibilities. Smoke curls from a nearby fire where the last kettle of yak butter tea simmers loyal to its duty. You stretch your legs, full to the eyelids, the warmth of communal eating still lingering in your bones. But now the feast shifts from bodily hunger to something softer, nostalgia, memory story. Because no Mongol banquet would be complete without oral tales. A bard sits cross-legged on a woolen mat, his moraine cour resting across his knees. He plucks a slow tune, one string humming deep, like hoofbeats, the other whining softly, like the wind across dry plains. The instrument's carved horsehead seems to nod in approval. Then he begins, not with an introduction, not with a flourish, but with a simple line. In the time when wolves still advised kings, you're in. He tells of a feast hosted by Kublai Khan, where dragons were served, not real ones, of course, but lavishly sculpted meat pies, shaped like mythical beasts, their scales formed from overlapping pastry, and their tongues dyed red with beetroot. The pies steamed and bled savory juice as they were sliced. Guests swore the aroma could revive the dead. One ambassador fainted. Another proposed marriage to the cook. You chuckle softly. This can't be real. But you don't care. It's the telling that matters. Historians still argue whether Mongol feasts incorporated theatrical food presentation, or if such stories are embellishments by later Persian and Chinese chroniclers. What is true, though, is that food and performance, often blurred meals, were staged as much as they were served. The bard continues. He speaks of candied horse apples, dried wild plums, glazed in honey, and wrapped in fig leaves. They were said to cure heartbreak, or cause it, depending on the chef's mood. There's a tale of fermented garlic yogurt, served in carved wooden bowls, each bearing the name of a fallen warrior. Guests drank to their honor, then wrestled beside the fire to determine who could take the bowl home. A woman across the circle chuckles. "We still do that," she mutters. Then there's the story of the silent feast, when a Mongol princess, grieving her brother's death, ordered a banquet in complete silence. Each dish was passed hand to hand, no word spoken, no eyes met. The menu included pale dumplings, white rice, and milk jelly, all ghost-colored to match mourning robes. When the last course was served, a bright yellow sweet made from egg yolks and pine honey, everyone wept. The bard pauses. A moment of reverence passes between spoonfuls. You stare into your empty bowl, haunted and oddly hungry again. More stories come. Tales of dishes made to mimic enemy flags, of wine infused with powdered silver, of ritual bread broken only after the stars appeared. Somewhere in the swirl of it all, you lose track of what's real and what's not. A man tells you he once ate a dumpling so spicy it made him hallucinate his dead horse asking for one too. You believe him? Someone else describes throat cakes, pastries, fried into spirals and tossed high into the air before being caught on skewers. A dangerous game, especially if the oil was still hot. The winner got a song written about him. The loser got bandages. You wonder if it's all metaphor, or if metaphor is just code for, we didn't write this down, but trust me. The Morin Cour music hums on hypnotic. Nearby, someone heats fermented mare's milk in a blackened pot, stirring slowly with a ladle carved from antler. You've heard of this air egg, lightly alcoholic, slightly fizzy, and famously unpredictable. No two batches are the same. You're handed a wooden cup. It smells like sour apples and damp leather. You sip. It's alive. Sharp, tangy, just a little dangerous, like it might argue with you later in the night. But it's strangely addictive, like lemonade mixed with mischief. You sip again, slower. Historians still debate the role of arag at Mongol banquets. Was it reserved for special rituals, or simply a daily beverage that flowed more freely than water? What's known is that even visiting foreign dignitaries were expected to drink it. Refusing was not only rude, but occasionally interpreted as a challenge. You make a mental note to always accept dairy-based gifts from Mongols. The bard winds down his story. The last notes of the Morin Cour linger like footprints in snow. You glance around. Faces glow from within. Not from the fire, but from something deeper connection, maybe. Or the quiet power of a shared story, folded into a shared meal. The feast has become a memory before your eyes. The platters are mostly empty now. A few crusts remain. Someone saves a dumpling for the morning. Someone else offers you a piece of hard cheese as a souvenir. You decline with a full heart and an overwhelmed stomach. The stars have returned bright as before, but now they feel closer, as if the stories themselves built a ladder into the sky. You settle onto a woolen mat head, resting against a saddlebag, eyes heavy. Tomorrow there will be more food, more tales, maybe a lesson in baking under saddle heat. But tonight you sleep with the taste of sour milk and sweet memory. And in the distance, a wolf howls not for hunger, but in applause. The morning doesn't arrive so much as tiptoe in cautious, not to wake the feast, still lingering in your belly. You stir beneath a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and steamed dumplings. The camp around you is slow to rise its residents, half buried in wool and slumber. Only the goats seem fully awake, chewing grass with the solemnity of scholars. Today you're told you'll learn what happens after the feast, because the Mongols, for all their reputation as roaming warriors, were oddly meticulous about leftovers. Waste was considered not just impractical, but offensive to the spirits, to the land, to the animal who gave its life. So the morning after a grand meal often looked like the backstage cleanup of a very well-fed circus. You follow a hunched old woman named Oyun, who appears to be the unofficial minister of reuse. She moves with purpose, wielding a knife in one hand and a ladle in the other, as though daring you to question her authority. Your first lesson broth. Every leftover bone from yak to sheep to fowl goes back into the pot. The morning broth is simmered with wild onions, horseradish leaves, and dried sea buckthorn, if available. The result, a potion somewhere between soup tea and memory, slightly oily, deeply savory, with a citrusy finish that makes your tongue reconsider all its previous decisions. You sip it with reverence. Historians still argue whether the Mongol obsession with bone broth had spiritual origins or was purely practical. Some claim it symbolized extracting the last essence of life from an animal. Others argue it was just very effective at preventing winter scurvy. Either way, it tasted like something you'd be willing to follow into battle. Second lesson, dumpling resurrection. Leftover booze from yesterday's feast. Because yes, a few escaped consumption are now pan-fried. This transforms them into something magical. Crispy outside, gooey inside, they resemble a cousin of gyoza, with a better attitude. Oyun calls them lazy warrior's breakfast. She cackles when you burn your tongue. Third lesson, repurposing dairy. Leftover milk is turned into curds, curds into cheese, cheese into soup base. You even witness someone whip up a sort of yogurt glaze using salt garlic and boiled horse milk. It's painted onto dried meat strips and left to firm under the morning sun. You are not offered a taste of this. You do not ask why. A fringe tidbit. Mongols sometimes season their leftover meat with powdered juniper ash, believing it could cleanse the wind in their guts. Modern scholars aren't sure if this worked, but they do agree that it probably kept their dental hygiene interesting. You peek inside one tent and discover a woman carefully packing dried dumplings into wax-sealed leather pouches. Travel food. These can last weeks, even months. She tells you a story about her uncle who once rode from Karakoram to the Caspian Sea with only one pouch of dumplings and an attitude. The uncle returned 2 years later, fatter than he left. The pouch was untouched. You don't ask questions. The camp is slowly coming alive now. Someone sharpens a knife. A child throws bones at a tree. You notice a row of bowls filled with various pastes, red, brown, green, and one that looks suspiciously like toothpaste for dragons. Oyun explains, these are condiments made from fermented berries, crushed spices, wild mustard, and the leftover oils skimmed from last night's soups. She uses a tiny stick to smear the red paste onto a strip of cheese and hands it to you. You bite. It's sweet and spicy and slightly alarming. You like it. One man offers you what he calls desert jerky. It's cured mutton, rubbed in salt, wrapped in horsehide, and left to air dry in saddlebags for 5 days. Supposedly, the leather infuses flavor. You nibble a corner and immediately understand why teeth were a valuable commodity in Mongol society. He beams. Still chewy. That means it's fresh. The sun climbs higher. A group of women gather near the fire and begin preparing a new batch of dough. Flat, wide rounds of flour, pressed thin and stretched over a convex griddle. These are bortsog, or fried dough snacks, a kind of proto-donut. They're fried in leftover fat from the previous evening's feast. The smell is illegal in some modern countries. You eat 2 before realizing you've already had 4. Somewhere a horse snorts disapprovingly. By now the air is thick with the sounds of domestic reset boots, drying bowls, clanking goats being reminded of their purpose in life. You help gather scraps and drop them into a communal compost pit ringed with herbs. Oyun insists the herbs keep away bad luck and flies. You suspect mostly flies. You're offered one final dish before the post-feast fast begins. Tsagan Buddha, sweet rice porridge cooked in milk with bits of fried dough crumbled on top. It's both breakfast and benediction. You eat slowly, savoring the creaminess and warmth. Historians still debate whether Tsagan Buddha originated from Central Asian influence or was a native invention. Some even believe it was a diplomatic dish served to visiting emissaries as a gesture of gentleness. You decide it's the kind of food you'd serve someone you didn't want to duel. As the sun nears its peak, the feast has officially dissolved into memory. The fire is out. The bones are clean. The pots are scraped. You sit quietly beside the embers, full of more than food. You feel like you've eaten history layer by layer, chew by chew. The flavors, the rituals, the jokes between bites, they've seeped into you like tea through wool. Tomorrow we'll be back to dried meat and salt cakes. But today you've feasted with kings and cooks, scholars and spoon makers, and somehow in the echo of empty bowls you feel closer to all of them. You rise again, not from hunger this time, but from curiosity. The feast may be over, but the utensils, cookware, and even the techniques behind them hum with stories of their own. And now you're ready to follow those threads back into the smoke-blackened pots, across the flat iron griddles, and into the calloused hands of Mongol chefs who knew how to stretch a meal across miles of steppe. A young man named Temulin waves you over to his workstation. He's crouched beside a mobile hearth made from beaten metal, warming a flat cooking stone that looks like it could double as a weapon. He gestures toward a leather pouch filled with flour, a goatskin sack of water, and a dented bowl of ash. Today, he says with a grin, we make food that doesn't need a kitchen. You're about to meet the genius of Mongol field cuisine. No stoves, no ovens, just stone fire and the kind of improvisation that could feed an army mid-March. Your first lesson, hot stone cooking. Temaloon pulls out a raw slab of mutton ribs and fat, still clinging defiantly, and places it inside a tightly woven sack. Then, with a practiced flick, he drops in 3 small glowing stones straight from the fire. The sack is tied shut and shaken violently, like a maraca that owes you money. The heat from the stone sears the meat inside, and within minutes, an aroma of charred fat and wood smoke rises. The result is cork hog, a smoky, slightly chewy stew that tastes like someone grilled a cloud. You're handed a bite, the meat so tender it slides off your tongue like a story waiting to be told. Mainstream historical fact: Mongols developed portable cooking methods specifically designed for fast-moving cavalry life. Unlike settled civilizations that depended on clay ovens or structured kitchens, Mongol cooks engineered mobile feasting systems. Hot stone cooking, boiling in metal helmets, and baking on saddle-heated flatbread were just a few. Next, you learn about budog, perhaps the most shocking technique. A whole goat is cleaned through its neck, stuffed with meat herbs, and yes, more hot stones. The entire animal becomes a self-contained oven. Then it's singed with fire to tighten the skin. The outer flesh browns and crisps, while the inside cooks in its own steam. Think of it as a goat-shaped slow cooker that smells mildly of vengeance and victory. You won't eat any today. It's a ritual dish reserved for special days, but you listen intently as Temaloon describes the crackling sound when the stones first touch marrow. It sings, he says, like it remembers. A quirky tidbit: some nomadic chefs use their iron stirrups as makeshift pans. Flip one, upside down. Fill the base with oil. Balance it over coals. And suddenly you're frying dumplings in the same gear you ride into battle with. Talk about multifunctional cookware. One rider apparently cooked 6 meatballs during a border skirmish. They won. Was it the protein? Historians are undecided. You move to another tent, where a woman named Dorlian demonstrates her version of a griddle. It's not metal. It's a flat slab of sandstone, heated over flame. Dough is slapped on in quick bursts, bubbles, rising as steam escapes. The bread, called gambir, is thin, crackly, and perfect for wrapping leftover meat or hiding from children who think it's too plain. Then there's the fermentation station managed by 2 elder women who look like they could silence thunder with a stare. They show you massive skin sacks, kukur, hung from wooden beams. Inside, fermented mare's milk swishes like a restless ghost. To agitate it properly, the sack must be beaten with a stick 500 times per session, not 499, not 501. You take a turn. After 30 hits, your arms are noodles. Too soft, one of them mutters. You'll never get a husband like that. You offer a sheepish grin and try again, open, scholarly debate. Historians still argue over how standardized these fermentation rituals were. Some claim every tribe had their own sacred rhythm. Others insist it was purely functional. But the consistency and longevity of fermented drinks like arag suggest deep cross-generational knowledge passed orally, not written. A culinary folklore etched in muscle memory. Outside, someone stirs soup in what looks like a bronze helmet. You're told this was common during campaigns when pots were scarce and heads were less so. This explains the occasional dent in army headgear and why no one ever eats soup too fast. Could be yesterday's armor, could be your cousin's. You laugh, but sip respectfully. Cooking tools weren't just utensils. They were relics, passed down, repaired, adorned with stories. A ladle might be carved from the same tree as your grandfather's bow. A stone used to boil broth might once have been part of a sacred cairn. You're shown a knife so old its handle has grooves from 3 generations of fingers. Still cuts turnips like a dream, says the owner, slicing through root like buttered air. As the day wanes, you help assemble a traveling feast kit, a leather roll that contains strips of dried meat, packets of wild herbs, sun-dried berries, and powdered yogurt cakes, known as arul. It's light, calorie-dense, and flavor-packed. You're told that a handful can fuel a man for a day, or frustrate him for 3. Depends on your tolerance for sour milk and existential questions. Temulin pats your back. Now you know how we feast with the wind. And you do. Because this was never just cooking. It was survival in motion cuisine, built not on spices, but on speed, smoke, and stubbornness. As dusk returns, you glance at the fire pit. Cold now, its stones scattered like quiet applause. Somewhere the scent of cooked fat still hangs in the wind. And you know the feast never really ends. It just changes shape. Night has cloaked the steppe again, not in silence, but in softness. The fires burn lower now, their embers glowing like the quiet eyes of horses half asleep. And the sky, oh, the sky, is a black velvet scroll, inked with constellations. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders, not because you're cold, but because your body knows the feast is winding down. But the Mongols, ever practical, are not done. Now comes the ritual of leftovers. You expect scraps, but you are so wrong, because in Mongol tradition, leftovers are never truly left over. They're repurposed, honored, and in many cases enhanced into something even better than the original dish. You watch as a bowl of half-eaten dumplings is mashed with sour yogurt and a splash of arag, creating a chilled salad with a flavor profile that sits somewhere between piquant and mildly suspicious. You try a bite. It's fantastic. A boy passes by chewing a stick of dried meat dipped in honey. You ask what it is. He shrugs. Tuesday snack. You try not to be offended that no one told you this was a thing. Dried meat bortz is a cornerstone of Mongol pantry life. made by slicing mutton or beef into thin strips, hanging it to dry in open air, and forgetting about it for 3 weeks. It's light, nearly immortal, and can be rehydrated into soups, stews, or even tea. You're told one great-grandmother made a stew from borts that had survived 3 wars and a camel stampede. No one got sick. Some even claimed they felt younger. Mainstream historical fact: borts allowed Mongol armies to march thousands of miles without supply lines. Portable, protein-rich, and shelf-stable. It was a strategic military ration long before protein bars were cool. Another cook prepares second boil stew, a thick broth made from bones already used once in the main meal. The idea: boil again, but slower, letting the marrow weep into the pot like a poet who's had one too many. Add turnips, fermented onions, and whatever herbs survived the goat stampede. The result is murky, mineral-rich, and oddly comforting. You sip it and feel like you've just had a conversation with your ancestors. Quirky tidbit: some herders believe that food absorbed intentions, and so leftover dishes were prepared in silence to avoid angering the spirits of ingredients already sacrificed. If someone joked or swore while cooking leftovers, the resulting meal might taste off, or led to dreams about being chased by angry cheese wheels. One man claims he still can't eat onions because of a cursed soup from 1972. You're invited to a smaller tent, a moon tent, where elder women prepare restorative porridges. These are given to the sick, the exhausted, or children who have cried themselves hoarse. The base is usually millet or barley, soaked in milk and slow-cooked with dried fruits or bits of sweet cheese. You sample a bowl of what looks like porridge but tastes like a lullaby. The kind that apologizes for everything the world has done to you today. One woman explains that healing foods were once marked with ash on the side of the bowl, a kind of culinary amulet. She offers you a spoon with a black smudge on the handle and smiles. Protection, she says. And also, we ran out of clean spoons. There's a dish called shul, a thin soup made from leftover bones, wild onions, and the broth of the main meal, traditionally consumed before dawn to ward off hangovers and ghosts. You suspect both are real threats out here. A man drinks 3 bowls in silence, then ties his boots and walks off into the dark like it's just another Tuesday. Historians still argue whether Mongol leftovers were governed by formal rules or simply tradition passed through demonstration. Some claim each family line had its own sequence of meals. Meal 1, feast. Meal 2, bone broth. Meal 3, dumpling mash. Meal 4, dog bowl, if the dog was lucky. Others suggest these were improvised based on availability and mood. You find yourself admiring the efficiency. Nothing wasted. Every crumb has a second act. Even the ashes from the fire are used to clean pots, ward off insects, or if sprinkled with herbs burned as offerings to ancestors. A girl scrapes the last bit of clarified yak butter from a jar with a twig. For my hair, she says, and proceeds to comb it through her braid like a spa treatment. Another child uses leftover cheese to polish the edge of his carved bone whistle. You pretend this is normal, because here it is. Even dessert has a reincarnation. That leftover millet pudding, it's now fried into cakes and sprinkled with sugar from traded Chinese markets. Crusty on the outside, soft on the inside, it crackles under your teeth like secrets. Later, a teenage boy unpacks a small leather box and removes a cube of something yellowish and dense. He cuts it into smaller squares and hands them out solemnly. Cheese fudge, he says, made from boiled down yogurt, dried milk, and honey. It's like a protein bar invented by a grandmother with unresolved issues. You chew slowly. It's delicious and possibly immortal. You're shown a list of taboos, unspoken rules around leftover use. No mixing fish and milk. No reboiling dumplings after midnight. Never stir soup counterclockwise if you've had an argument with your mother. Most are practical. Some are poetic, but all are remembered. As the final embers cool, you witness the closing act, dish burial. Not all dishes are washed. Some are ceremonially buried with hot stones and herbs to return the flavor to the earth. It's a kind of culinary composting. One child giggles as she plants a spoon next to a rib bone and says, "Grow well." You feel yourself smiling, not from amusement, but from awe. This wasn't just eating. It was renewal. A meal stretched over hours, days, even lifetimes. A tradition where even the scraps were sacred and the bones knew your name. You sip one last bowl of bone broth, savoring its quiet strength, and you realize the Mongols didn't just conquer with horses and bows. They conquered with fire, with patience, and with the radical idea that nothing should be wasted, not even flavor. You wake to the scent of smoke and milk, not burnt smoke, not scorched milk, just warmth. The smell of another dawn rising over the steppe like a sleepy yawn. A goat sneezes somewhere outside the gyr. A rooster that definitely doesn't belong to royalty tries to assert dominance with a crooked crow. It's morning again, and breakfast, dear traveler, is not for the faint of heart. You shuffle toward the fires, where steam curls upward from dented metal pots. A young cook greets you with a nod and hands you a bowl of something that looks like beige lava. "Tsuivan," he says. You brace yourself. Tsuivan is one of the most beloved staples in the Mongol culinary world. A noodle dish, yes, but with the kind of chaotic energy only a culture raised in the saddle could bring to it. The noodles, made from flour, water, and salt, are first fried, then steamed on top of stir-fried meat and vegetables. Not mixed in, not served on the side, stacked. Because Mongols don't believe in rules, only layering. You take a bite. The noodles are soft, but with singed, crispy edges soaked in sheep fat and sweet onion. The mutton is tender and smoky. It tastes like victory, or maybe just a very stubborn sheep. Mainstream historical fact. Cuisine is one of the few Mongol dishes that likely evolved from Chinese stir-fry techniques fused with their preference for flat noodles and whatever root vegetables happened to survive last night's frost. Quirky tidbit. Some families believe the direction of noodle layering affects the luck of the day. Clockwise means progress. Counterclockwise means delay. The cook this morning grins. I layered both directions, he says. Life is balance. You nod slowly and keep chewing. Next comes milk tea, but not the sweet cafe kind. This is su te tsai, a salty brew made from brick tea, boiled with milk salt, and sometimes a lump of butter or even flour. It's not trying to be charming. It's trying to wake your ancestors. You sip, and it tastes like the steppe, wide, bold, a little briny, and unforgettable. You're told that during royal mornings, the Khan's tea would be stirred by a silver spoon, not for luxury, but because silver was believed to detect poison. The spoon is long gone, but the tradition remains in ceremonial cups, engraved with horse motifs. Then, someone offers you arul dried curds made from fermented milk. These are small, hard, and white, like pebbles that have decided to taste sour. You pop one in your mouth and immediately regret it. It does not dissolve. It challenges your teeth to a duel. Chew slowly, says the old woman. Or not at all. Turns out arul is not meant to be chewed like candy. It's meant to sit in your cheek and soften with time, like a thought you're not ready to say out loud. Some historians suggest Genghis Khan carried arul in a leather pouch during campaigns, sucking on it during long rides to avoid hunger and silence nerves. Meanwhile, a pot bubbles ominously in the center of camp. Someone stirs it with a stick as thick as your wrist. You peer inside. It's guril tai shul, a flour soup made by browning flour in butter before slowly adding milk and water. The result: a velvety beige potion that looks like glue but tastes like grandma's warm hug. The children dip stale flatbread into it, let it soak, then eat with both hands. You follow their lead. It's delicious, slightly nutty, creamy, and filling without being heavy. Off to the side, a man uses a hot stone to griddle flat cakes made from leftover barley mash and clotted cream. They're called bortsog, when sweet kushur, when savory. These fall somewhere in between. You eat two before realizing you were supposed to share. You ask about fruit. Everyone laughs. There are berries in the summer. Yes. Sometimes wild rhubarb or fermented apple. But most mornings the Mongol palate is about fuel, not flavor. Warmth, not whimsy. One woman offers you a small jar. Inside is something thick and beige with dark swirls. Caramelized yak milk, she says. It smells like burnt sugar and secrets. You dip a finger and taste it, and the world briefly pauses. It's glorious, rich, smoky, and sweet enough to make your teeth ache. Historians still debate whether these dairy delicacies were luxury goods reserved for the elite or everyday staples across herding communities. Some evidence suggests that during royal celebrations, this caramel was served in carved bone dishes, often paired with crumbly cheese and dried apricots from Silk Road traders. As breakfast winds down, the older men begin singing low, throaty harmonic chants that vibrate in your chest. It's kumi, or throat singing, and it sounds like wind trapped in a cave. The sound weaves between the steam and smoke, threading itself into your bones like morning light. You sip more tea. Your hands are greasy. Your belly is full. Someone presses a coin into your palm. For the road, they say. You don't know if it's payment or blessing. Maybe both. Nearby, a woman is milking a camel. You do not ask questions, because sometimes Mongol breakfasts are best enjoyed in silence, with only the whisper of hoofbeats in the distance and the rising sun warming your cheeks. And with that, the day begins. You stretch, not because you're stiff, though you are, but because your soul is full, like comfortably full, not the kind of bloated full that comes from too many dumplings, but the kind where your mind feels like it's been gently, slowly wrapped in a warm wool blanket woven from horsehair and stories. And that's good, because now it's time for the final course, not of food, but of feeling. You follow the winding trail from camp to a quiet hillside where the grass sways with the kind of confidence only centuries of history can bestow. The sky overhead has softened from royal blue to a warm amber glow, the kind that tells you the day is slipping toward dusk. The wind, once sharp and bracing, has mellowed into a hush, like the last page of a favorite book. Here you sit, beside an old man, with a face like wrinkled parchment. He doesn't speak for a while, just stares at the horizon, where golden clouds lazily roll like baked meringue. Then he hums, a low, slow melody with no clear beginning and no urgency to end. You ask if he was ever a palace cook. He laughs. No, he says, but my father's uncle once stirred broth for a general who fought beside the Kagan. Does that count? Yes. Yes, it does. You sip warm air-ag fermented mare's milk again. By now, the tang no longer surprises you. Instead, it comforts, like the sourness has become a signature flavor of all Mongol memory. It coats your tongue and sharpens your sense of place. The old man tells you about feast etiquette at royal tables. There was always order, he says, but never stiffness. Even the Khan chewed with his mouth open if the meat was good enough. Mainstream historical fact. Mongol feasts were communal, yet structured. Seating order reflected rank, but conversation flowed freely. Cups were passed, hands reached across laps, and everyone ate from shared platters with trust that you weren't the kind of person who double dips. Quirky tidbit. Some Khans insisted that no meal begin until the royal dog had licked the rim of the first bowl. Not for hygiene, but for loyalty. A silent blessing in fur. Historians still argue whether that's poetic embellishment or just a very spoiled dog. As the fire crackles nearby, someone tosses juniper onto the embers. Smoke rises, sweet, sharp, medicinal. It stings your nose and makes your eyes water just enough to feel something without needing to explain it. This is your final bite, your final moment. And it is not grand. No fireworks, no gold, just the scent of charred herbs, just the quiet lull of throat singing drifting up the hill, just a belly full of milk noodles and stories. Historians still argue whether Mongol cuisine was refined or rustic. But you know now that it was neither. It was real. It was practical. It was inventive because it had to be, and celebratory because life on the steppe didn't offer many guarantees beyond wind hooves and a horizon that always moved slightly out of reach. You lean back, watching the clouds gather above the plains, where goats and dreams both wander freely. You think of dumplings stuffed with mutton and secrets, of bones boiled in bronze helmets, of cheese that challenges your teeth to a duel, and of cooks who made joy out of scarcity. Here, the meal was always more than what sat in the bowl. It was a memory made edible, a laugh you could chew on, a sunrise folded into every flatbread. And now, you feel it's time to sleep. So now, with the last embers of the fire fading into quiet ash, you let your shoulders sink. Let the pace of your breath slow. Let the lingering taste of milk tea and wood smoke melt into something softer, something that wraps itself around your chest like a woolen cloak in winter. Outside your window, whether you live in Chicago, Seoul, Nairobi, or a tiny town, no one ever writes about the world continues to churn. Traffic rumbles, lights flicker, notifications buzz like hungry flies. But here, in this little corner of your mind, the only sounds are the whisper of wind through grass, the low echo of a lullaby hummed by a shepherd's grandmother, and the memory of stories passed down beside open fires under a sky far too wide to measure. You are full. You are safe. You are tucked between centuries of laughter, invention ritual, and the soft hum of contentment that comes only after a good meal and a good story. Let your eyelids drift lower now. Let the heaviness of history become the lightness of dreams. You don't need to remember every detail. You just need to remember how it made you feel. Warm, curious, connected, like maybe somewhere in another lifetime you once rode beneath these same stars, bowl in hand, dumpling on tongue, smile on face. And maybe you will again. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.